You come to work every day, you try to do the best job you can, and you have very high standards for yourself and for those around you.
The legacy of Jim is that a lot of people consider he is Action News.
This would be the first time they have stepped foot on American territory in more than 440 days.
They know that the stakes are extraordinarily high.
I'm Jim Gardner, Channel 6 Action News at the White House.
Jim's thing was always to get it right.
We've all tried to follow in those footsteps. I know that I have.
I don't think he realizes what a big deal he is.
What's the hardest thing about being a college basketball coach? And the big story on Action News tonight.
When you hear Jim's voice, that's when you know you're home.
He is the man.
He's one of us.
I think those unscripted moments are probably my favorite one.
We don't take ourselves too seriously.
Line Jimmy's guest tonight, Billy Crystal, with music from Jeezy and French Montana.
Thank you very much, Jim, for adjusting that. Thank you very much. Okay.
But we take our work really seriously. We respect the viewer.
He's a good man, and I'm going to miss him.
He raised the bar.
He's Philly through and through.
You want to do a good job because you want to serve your viewers to the best of your ability. And if you do good work, then you let the chips fall where they may.
Good evening. We're looking forward to bringing you this hour-long special as we celebrate Jim. I'm Cecily Tynan.
And I'm Deuces Rogers. One of the rules of being a journalist is don't become the story. In this case, we're making an exception. Jim and his incredible career is the story.
We have so much to share with you tonight. It's no surprise, over 46 years of work.
So where do we begin? It only makes sense to go back to the start. And in this case, that's well before Jim even walked in the door here at Action News.
Rick Williams brings us on Jim's journey.
I went to Columbia University as a pre-med. My dad was a rather eminent physician, and I guess from the time I was 5 years old and onward, there was this assumption in my family that I was going to be a doctor. I got to college and took inorganic chemistry as a freshman, and about 3 to 4 weeks into that, I came to the conclusion that I wasn't going to be a doctor.
Jim says that realization made him a free agent when it came to what's next.
I loved working at the college radio station, WKCR Radio. We just had a blast doing play-by-play for college football and basketball.
Then came a pivotal moment, not just in history, but Jim's personal history.
Spring of my sophomore year, 1968, things at Columbia changed radically.
Jim found himself right in the middle of the Columbia student uprising.
So the radio station then enlisted every student who was involved in the radio station in any capacity to become journalists, student journalists, to document and broadcast and tell the story of this 3-week period where these buildings were occupied.
Jim Goldman from Low West. There has been a confrontation here with the food issue. 20 clergymen came here with some food. There was an attempt to get it up on the ledge. The faculty pushed them back, and then there was another attempt, this time repulsed by the police.
What was a terribly disruptive time on my campus, although an intellectually stimulating time on my campus, it served as my epiphany, in a sense, my personal epiphany. This is what I wanted to do with my professional life. My first job in media, I was a copy boy at WINS All News Radio in New York.
That was in 1970. And by 1972, Jim was a radio reporter at WFAS Radio in White Plains, New York. The transition to broadcast reporter did not come so easily.
It seems that you have to work in television before you can get a job working in television.
So Jim contemplated Plan B.
I applied to a PhD program at Brown University in international affairs, political science and international affairs.
Then came an offer for a reporter position from WKBW-TV in Buffalo, New York in 1974.
So after a few weeks of rumination, I went to Buffalo instead of Providence and started this career in television news.
Imagine if Plan B was activated. Jim's career came to another crossroads in 1976.
I was offered a job at WPLG in Miami as a 5 o'clock anchor.
Jim, a Miami man, Again, imagine what would have, could have been. But Jim's boss in Buffalo has to plan with the general manager, Larry Pollock, at WPVI in Philadelphia to keep him within the company.
And we had an opening for a 12 noon news show, and thank goodness we did. That was in June of 1976.
I thought that was a great opportunity, and I was thankful and feeling blessed.
Less than a year later, Jim assumed the anchor position of Action News at 6 and 11.
And as someone a long time ago said, the rest is history.
But the big story on Action News tonight.
Jim believes that a successful anchor must be a good writer and reporter. And on many occasions, Jim has left the newsroom to bring you the big story.
Matt O'Donnell explains.
In 1978, Jim followed John Cardinal Kroll to the Vatican for the death of Pope Paul VI.
Philadelphia Archdiocese and for Action News. The events leading up to the Pope's funeral began at Kennedy Airport in New York.
But the people here in Rome seem to think of Pope Paul as their Pope, and they see his death as their own personal loss. Jim Gardner, Channel 6 Action News in Rome.
And Jim was in Havana for Pope John Paul II's historic trip to Fidel Castro's communist Cuba.
The Pope has now arrived here in Revolution Square to tell his message of peace, love, and freedom.
Fast forward to 2015, before Pope Francis traveled to Philadelphia for the World Meeting of Families. Jim traveled to Argentina to report on the humble beginnings of Pope Francis, born Jorge Bergoglio.
This is the neighborhood where Jorge Bergoglio, Pope Francis, grew up. In fact, his house is not far from here.
He did find himself walking left here toward this confessional, this very confessional, and he took confession. Afterwards, he said that he had felt the presence of God here.
And everybody waving American flag.
Jim traveled to West Germany in 1981 for the release of 52 Americans held hostage in Iran.
This would be the first time they have stepped foot on American territory in more than 440 days.
Doors to the plane opened. A roar went up from the crowd, and when the first former hostage showed his face, a surge of emotion raced through the hearts of everybody here, including mine.
Jim was in Moscow after the collapse of the Soviet Union in the early 1990s.
Lenin's tomb, for generations a symbol of Soviet power and the vision of a communist worker state. Of course, Mikhail Gorbachev and certainly Boris Yeltsin have now conceded that that vision has failed.
But walking into Red Square as a reporter, after having lived through those images when I was a kid, was an unbelievable experience.
And he's traveled to report on tensions in the Middle East.
Let me try to show you why Israel thought it was so critically important to conquer the Golan Heights during the Six-Day War and eliminate these Syrian gun emplacements.
More recently, Jim went to Las Vegas in the wake of the mass shooting that left 60 dead and more than 400 injured.
It is Tuesday night, and the big story on Action News tonight is Day 2 AMS here in Las Vegas after the mass shooting.
He reported not only on the tragedy, but the healing led by Ben Bishop and Philadelphia native Joseph Pepe.
What will your role be in trying to make Las Vegas heal?
Through 4 decades of his career at Action News, Jim made it clear that the theme of helping you move closer to your world was more than just a message. It was a mission.
There's so much more to cover on Jim's extraordinary career. We'll look back at the history-making events Jim guided our region through over 46 years.
And on the campaign trail, taking him to political conventions across the country and even into the halls of the White House as he sits down to interview presidents.
And we'll relive some of the classic promos you might remember.
Plus, see some of our all-time favorite bloopers and moments when Jim couldn't stop laughing on set. Cecily and I are to blame for some of those.
That's true. And we've also got some surprise guests, tributes, and we'll hear from the Action News alumni. And remember the ones we lost.
And as we celebrate Jim, we'll hear from him in his own words. What motivated him, what inspires him, and colleagues reveal the things you didn't know Jim was up to behind the scenes.
Stay right there as we have a wealth of stories to share with you tonight.
Hi, Jim. Greetings from the nationally champion Philadelphia Phillies here at Citizens Bank Park. I'm in the dressing room of a very important person. And here he is now. You wanted to, what you want to do for Jim? Oh, you wanted to wish him good luck. Fanatic, that's great.
Hi, Jim. It's Rob Jennings. I want to congratulate you on a legendary career at Action News and wish you a long and fun-filled retirement. You've earned it.
Jim, congratulations on your retirement. You've had a magnificent and legendary and unprecedented run at the top of this tough business.
Being an anchorman can take its toll. Jim didn't always look like this. Look what I dug out of the crypt. Here's a picture of Jim from the 1980s, barely a gray hair on his head. But decades of doing Philly news will do this to you. Jim, thank you for everything. We appreciate it. And thanks for reminding us every day what real journalism is all about.
He is Philadelphia.
Jim's like up here.
You gotta hear it from Jim.
I gotta hear it from Jim.
Everyone has to hear it from Jim.
Jim is an institution.
You got that right, people.
Yes, they said you got to hear it from Jim. 46 years, countless big stories, but one constant has been Jim Gardner in the Action News anchor chair, guiding the viewers of the Delaware Valley through calm and crisis.
Shari Williams takes a look at history as it unfolded.
But the big story on Action News is the full force of Mother Nature and the constant threat of tragedy. It is Friday night, and the big story on Action News tonight is the countdown to midnight and the start of the new millennium. The big story on Action News tonight is a new development in the battle between the city of Philadelphia and residents of the move homes in West Philadelphia. The big story on Action News tonight is what officials in Drexel Hill are calling a miracle.
During his tenure, Jim has been the most trusted and most watched source for news. He has guided the region through major weather threats from hurricanes.
The big story on Action News tonight is the approach of a massive hurricane. Gloria is getting closer.
To tornadoes, to blizzards.
22.5 inches of snow have officially fallen, probably close to 23 by now.
There have been man-made disasters. 3 Mile Island near Harrisburg was the scene of the nation's worst nuclear mishap.
Rob Jennings is in Harrisburg tonight. Rob, can you add anything from your perspective right now?
Jim, it's been a very harrowing day.
And catastrophes. In 1991, a tragic mid-air collision over Marion Elementary School killed 7 people, including Senator John Hines and 2 children on the ground. And in May of 2015, there was the deadly derailment of a speeding Amtrak train in Port Richmond. Jim has covered many Philadelphia firsts.
The election of Wilson Goode, I think, was, one of the seminal stories of my career here.
All of us working together can solve the problem facing our city.
As mayor of Philadelphia, the first black mayor of Philadelphia, it clearly was a point of embarkation, of a new political world in Philadelphia.
Goode's legacy was marred by the second clash with the black liberation group MOVE in Cobbs Creek on Mother's Day 1985. The 1980s also featured mob wars, triggered by the murder of mob boss Angelo Bruno. And the Abscam bribery and corruption sting ensnared 7 members of Congress, 1 member of the New Jersey Senate, members of the Philadelphia City Council, and the mayor of Camden were also convicted. Jim led the coverage of 2 papal visits to Philadelphia, Pope John Paul II in 1979 and Pope Francis in 2015.
The city gave the Holy Father its warmest welcome and in return received an experience that it will remember for years to come.
The big story in February 1991 was the blaze that broke out on the 22nd floor of One Meridian Plaza in Center City.
They had a complete failure of all the fire protection systems and the electricity to the building.
3 Philadelphia firefighters were killed. 6 people were killed and 13 injured when a building being demolished collapsed on an adjacent Salvation Army thrift store on Market Street in 2013. And then there's Philadelphia being plagued with record homicides.
And the fact that this is going on in this country, to me, is it's more than a shame. It's a true tragedy.
The death of George Floyd by police officers sparked protests in Philadelphia and beyond. But perhaps the biggest stories have come at the end of Jim's career. Stories that extended his time at Action News.
So, if truth be known, I was going to, my timetable had me retiring a few years ago. And then Donald Trump became president of the United States. An extraordinary time politically in this country. And I think it'll end up being an extraordinary time historically in this country, but it was a story I didn't want to miss.
Health officials say COVID-19 infections are spiking at an alarming rate across the United States.
And COVID came. It touches people in so many different ways. It was a health story, a medical story. It was an economic story, as we're still finding out. So for me, it was just a story that I desperately wanted to be a part of, because I felt after 42 years, you know, this might be the most important story that Action News would experience over that 4-decade period of time, and how could I not be a part of it?
Global newsmakers, faith leaders, celebrities, local icons, you name it, Jim has sat down to talk with several notable figures over 4.5 decades.
Alicia Vitarelli highlights some of these one-on-one interviews.
How are you going to use the Nobel Peace Prize to further your mission, to further your cause?
It was my dream to see every child going to school, and I want to continue this campaign.
Action! Can we talk about movies for a minute?
Sure.
Do you still love making them?
You know, that's a good question. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that.
Shyamalan is a Philadelphia boy. He went to Episcopal Academy, then NYU, and now lives in Williston, Chester County.
Jim has talked one-on-one with notable figures from the entertainment world to religious leaders.
Where is the word reform relevant in terms of the Catholic Church and what you might be talking about at the World Meeting of Families?
The word reform in Catholic tradition means conversion, which means we reform our life after the pattern given to us by the gospel.
Actor Richard Gere talked with Jim when he was in Philadelphia to accept the Liberty Medal on behalf of his friend, the Dalai Lama.
How rare it is to be in the presence of someone who genuinely wants you to be happy. And it's not about him. You know, and you feel that immediately.
A performing artist once told me that he can sometimes tell what city he is in because he can feel the personality of the audience. Is there a personality to the Philadelphia audience, and if so, what is it?
It's always a great time. I mean, I've always loved playing Philadelphia. They just go from the start.
Can an orchestra be great without a great conductor?
Well, of course, from a conference perspective, they love it.
We traveled to State College to meet the man who, with the start now of his first training camp, holds the Penn State football fortunes in his hands. Is there anything more important than winning?
Yeah, that's a very small part of it. And I know a lot of coaches say that. I believe that.
So there's Jay Wright before you won 2 national championships, and there's a Jay Wright after you won 2 national championships. Is that the same person?
Man, I hope so, Jim. I really do hope so. I try to keep it the same person. People treat you differently, and so you always have to be cognizant of that. But I want to be the same guy. I don't want to be the national championship coach. I just want to be husband, father, coach of Villanova.
One theme that's a constant in Jim's reporting: mutual respect between the interviewer and the interviewee.
I'll come home and I'm here, and you come home, like, I'm home.
That mutual respect was on display just a few weeks ago when Abbott Elementary creator and star Quinta Brunson finally met Jim in person at the 6ABC Duncan Thanksgiving Day Parade.
You are redoing the landscape of television, and you are, and you know you are. And oh my goodness, it's so nice to meet you.
Thanks for being in my show. Even the stars get starstruck. Brunson is such a fan that she sought out Jim for a cameo in season 1.
But the Philadelphia region continues to suffer temperatures in the mid-90s with the heat index approaching 100.
Now, I'm a proud married Christian woman, and I love my husband. But there's something about that Jim Gardner, that non-regional diction. I saw Jim Gardner once at the Chipotle. Oh, he ordered a bowl so handsomely.
Oh, hold this up. No one can hear me. I was saying everyone now knows the beauty of Jim Gardner.
Those are some of the many moments in front of the camera over the years, but what is Jim like behind the scenes.
Up next, we'll share what it's really like to work with Jim Gardner and what he's actually up to during those commercial breaks.
When Jim was doing the 11, he would have to read the Jimmy Kimmel teas. And Jimmy Kimmel would have these bands with the most obscure names.
I'm Jimmy's guest tonight, Billy Crystal, with music from Jeezy and French Montana. All right, let's just keep going. Here, you want to end the show?
Action News.
We'll be back tomorrow, I think, maybe. And music from Weezer. Now you get Jeezy and Weezer together. It's the Jeezy Weezer Show. Music from Philadelphia native Mondo Cosmo. Who? Let's get him together with Jeezy and Weezer. All right, we're going to get through this. Jimmy's guest tonight, Roseanne Barr, John Goodman, and musical guest.
I don't even know what's funny.
I can't tell you. All right, Chloe, exhale. Good night. Mike. Oh, you got to be kidding. Zoe Saldana. How do you say her name?
That was right.
That was right. For the entire Action News team, I'm Jim Gardner. Good night.
For the entire Action News team, I'm Jimmy Gardner. Good night. Let's try it again.
Classic. You know the face, the voice, the calm and clear delivery during breaking news. But what happens behind the scenes that you never knew about Jim?
Well, here are some tidbits.
He loves the Broadway musical stuff. All you have to do is sing a song or mention a show, and he lights up.
He still sings Broadway tunes on commercial breaks sometimes. I think a lot of viewers don't know that.
But could he carry a tune?
He actually has a pretty good voice.
I said, stop. I don't want to hear you sing.
Rick and Cecily say Jim could be trouble.
Sometimes you never know what he was going to do.
And he will stand next to the camera and try to make me laugh. And so it's payback for me making him laugh.
He would walk into the studio and just kind of stand off camera and just kind of, just look at you like this, while you're trying to do the news, and just stand there. He could be a bit mischievous.
The chemistry you see on air wasn't forced. They really do get along that well.
I think my favorite memories of Jim will come from the stuff that happened behind the scenes that the viewers have no idea about.
Every day around 4:30, he comes to the sports office. He goes and gets his mail, opens his mail by my desk, throws his mail in my recycling bin, and we just sit and just chat.
And Jim found ways to connect, even when the world tries to keep people apart.
The 2 years of COVID, where I was in my basement, I legitimately miss seeing him. And I'll tell you this, Jim came to my house a couple times. Just came to my house, pulled up in the driveway, and we sat and just hung out.
Jim wouldn't only visit the sports office to chat.
Now, a lot of the times he comes back here for food because I'm one of his candy suppliers. What people don't know is Jim Gardner has a sweet tooth. He takes the most amazing pictures. The pictures he took on his safari in Africa, they're just stunning. I mean, he could sell them.
It turns out he's also a football coach on set.
Friday night football, we do high school huddle, and Cecily always threw the football to the sportscaster, and Jim's just trying to teach her how to throw a spiral.
No, she doesn't want my help.
No, I do.
Stand sideways to the target, and as you throw, rotate into the throw. Let the ball go.
That was pretty good.
Let the ball go.
Quit. Oh my God! Extra my best. Did you get that?
So did you ever figure out how to throw an in-studio spiral?
Let's just say we'll leave the passing to Jalen Hurts.
Good idea. Still ahead, the anchor team of the 90s and 2000s that we all looked up to. Jim, Dave Roberts, and Gary Papa. Jamie Apodi has this insight for us about how much those friends meant to Jim.
Since Gary died and Dave retired, if you go look at Jim's desk out in the newsroom, he only has 3 framed pictures on his desk. His family, Gary, and Dave. And I think that says a lot.
Coming up, we're going to pay tribute to 2 incredible co-anchors we lost, Gary Papa and Jim O'Brien, and the mark their deaths left on Jim's heart.
Hey, Jim, we on for Saturday?
AccuWeather says rain.
But let's make it Sunday. I'm Jim.
So if you want to keep up with what's happening, do what the Action News team does.
Something to eat, guys, and it's your turn to drive. Because
No way, pal. You are.
we're not going to argue about this again.
Depend on the Action News team.
After being a trusted voice delivering news to more than 2 generations of Delaware Valley viewers, you will indeed be missed. And at the station, where colleagues become family, you will also be missed.
But the gain of your newfound freedom is the tri-state area's loss. Viewers could always count on you to get the story right and to deliver it with balance and fairness. You will certainly be missed.
Delaware Valley, one team brings it all home to you. Jim Gardner, Cecily Tynan, and Gary Papa, sharing with you the moments that make history.
2 of the hardest moments in Jim's career were reporting on the deaths of his longtime colleagues, Jim O'Brien and Gary Papa. The first came suddenly, without warning. The other, a heartbreaking struggle that stretched out for years. Throughout the 90s and 2000s, the Delaware Valley turned to the team of Jim Gardner, Dave Roberts with AccuWeather, and Gary Papa with sports. They were the most watched, most beloved team for nearly 2 decades.
My time with Dave Roberts and Gary was magic.
It is a family. It truly, truly is a family. Do we get along all the time? Does your family get along all the time?
With all the love and good-natured hijinks that come with it.
This is a talented broadcaster. You really are.
Why's that?
To be able to make sense out of this kind of a script.
And when you know each other that well, sometimes it's hard to keep it together.
Dave Roberts just had to give me a subtle, hardly noticeable look, and I was done.
Nice night tonight, and everything's going to be fine tomorrow. You okay? Huh? Mr. Lautrec?
1 second. Now we got to fix this. Hold on. No, go to the 2-shot. Can we get back to the 2-shot?
Maybe.
All right, hold on. There we go.
Oh, that feels better.
Gary was Gary. We just lost it on occasion.
Do you want to do something you've never done on television
Go
before?
ahead. What? Toss the weather?
Toss to Dave Roberts in the AccuWeather forecast.
What do I say?
I just did.
Whatever you said. Here's David with that AccuWeather forecast.
Thank you very much, Gary.
Oh,
Thank you very much,
Dave.
Tim. Yes, all right. People enjoy seeing you be human.
They arrived in Philadelphia at different points, but all 3 of them shared a connection to the city of Buffalo, New York. Dave Roberts says it helped form their bond.
One of the other connections that we all had that probably no one knows was Gary grew up in Buffalo, New York. Jim worked in Buffalo in the beginning of his career, and I was born and grew up in Buffalo, New York.
Jim and Gary bonded over their love of sports.
There was a wonderful bond between the 2 of them, and I just kind of tagged along.
Even though some might have said the straight-laced Jim and the wildly energetic Gary had opposite personalities.
It was the odd couple type thing with the 2 of them. And that was fun to watch.
Gary was larger than life. His talent was immense. He was a little scattered sometimes and a little disorganized, and that just added to the whole Gary Papa thing.
Gary was named sports director at Channel 6 in 1990. Even though he'd been working at the station for years, winning over Jim was a challenge. Gary did it through his infectious humor and wit, as his widow, Kathleen, recalls.
I remember vividly Gary being unusually jittery, anxious actually, and he had just gotten the main job at Channel 6. And I was asking him, what's going on? You seem very apprehensive. And it was uncharacteristic of him. He said, I'm going in, and it's the first official week doing the 6 and 11 with Jim and Dave. I said, okay. He goes, but I'm a little nervous. And I said, why? You've worked there for a long time at this point. What's going on? And he said, but it's Gardner. And I said, yes, it's Gardner. It's Gardner. And he said, Kath, it's Gardner. And he's going to be sitting right there. I do remember a couple of weeks after Gary started, he came home, and one time he just had this smirk on his face. I said, what's going on? And he said, looked up and he said, I got him to laugh today.
A bond to last a lifetime.
Jim's friendship, relationship with Gary was so impactful.
And when Gary announced to viewers in 2004 that he was battling prostate cancer, he also knew he had the love and support of his desk mates.
I'm me. Everything's the same, and I'm really in the best shape of my life, and I got 2 best guys in the world to be here for everything.
That's correct. Your family.
Oh, I wasn't talking about you two.
We'll be back. We love you, you know that. We'll be back with Gary's Sports Report in just a moment.
More than you know.
Last year with Gary and his difficulties, yeah, we needed each other.
They once again turned to humor to get them through the tough times.
First of all, trying to be as strong as possible. And then secondly, trying to look for the humor in it.
When Gary first had to shave his head after chemo, he said that he was driving to work one day and he was so upset because in the rearview mirror, the color of the chair in his headrest was the same color now of his head. And he was joking and he was like, I can't tell the difference between my head and the car. And he told Jim the story. And Gardner looks down and he looks back at Gary and goes, maybe you should get a new car.
In 2007, Gary would share with viewers that he was undergoing chemotherapy once again. He told colleagues how he fought it with all he had for his family, Kathleen, and their 2 boys, Tucker and Nathaniel.
It was diagnosed back in August, and we've been dealing with this since then.
At work, Jim was the rock.
There were times sitting next to him where I had trouble keeping my composure on the air because it was such an emotional experience for me sometimes sitting next to him. And when he died, it was brutal.
It wasn't Jim's first experience with tragedy on set. Weatherman Jim O'Brien died unexpectedly in a skydiving accident in 1983.
Most of you have never met him personally, but many of you will shed some tears tonight. Undoubtedly, many of you already have. We certainly will understand if you do. There have been many tears spilled here at Channel 6, and there will be many more. Jim, we will miss you more than you could ever know. Chris.
Thanks, Jim.
So, in a sense, you know, I lost Jim O'Brien to clearly an untimely, tragic death, and then we lost Gary. It's just not supposed to happen, or maybe it is, but I certainly wasn't prepared for it.
Coincidentally, there was a connection between Gary Papa and Jim O'Brien. After Jim's death, it was Gary who took over for the long-running weekend program Primetime in 1983.
Come to Mama. Come to Papa.
Whatever. Those moments of levity didn't begin with Gary in the 90s. They date back to Jim's earliest years at WPVI in the 70s.
Well, needless to say, it started with O'Brien. He was relentless.
The only problem, the sailors had their shoes off. Jim O'Brien is standing by in case I can't finish this newscast. The Navy put the woman on report, and now they face a possible court-martial and 30 days.
O'Brien was already an established star in Philadelphia by the time Jim landed on the anchor desk here, just 27 years old. Not everyone was sure it would work out with this young and eager out-of-towner. Jim credits Jim O'Brien with helping him evolve into a better anchor.
Jim O'Brien, who ended up being a very, very good friend, and what a mentor. Not a mentor by him lecturing me and overtly teaching me television, but a mentor simply by watching him. He was clearly the most innately effective communicator in terms of making contact with a single viewer whom I've ever seen, to this day.
They were Jim's partners on screen. Executive producer Rick Williams was his partner off screen. Almost 40 years at Action News. Here's how Jim described Rick after we lost him this past summer to esophageal cancer.
His passion for local news was limitless. Whether he was joyful because he thought we did a good job or dismayed because he thought we had fallen short, he wore his emotions on his sleeve. And so sometimes we worked extra hard just to make sure Rick was happy.
Rick's efforts behind the scene were an influence on Jim's newscasts, and he leaves behind an extraordinary mark on Action News as well.
Someone else who played a major role in Jim's career is 6ABC President and General Manager Bernie Prozenica, especially in these final years.
Here are some thoughts from him on Jim's legacy.
It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for all of us that have worked here alongside him. And I know that he was the first to point to everyone else in the building and the role that they play, and that's correct and true, but Jim has been our leader, and Jim has really given us a wonderful opportunity to succeed.
We'll be right back with a look at how Jim is paying it forward and influencing the next generation of journalists.
Stay with us.
Hi, Jim. David Muir here at ABC's World News Tonight. But I must say, it is impossible to imagine Philadelphia without Jim Gardner on Action News. You've been a steady, caring, calming presence for decades on WPVI. No matter how difficult the news, how challenging the times, you provided the comfort and a careful hand in delivering the news every night.
Your work, your commitment, the way you ply your craft is something that I've always admired and I've always been proud of. I wish you lots of luck in your next adventure. I flunked retirement. Make sure you don't. Congratulations and thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Even the President of the United States honored the statesman of Action News. Joe Biden sent a congratulatory letter that was read during a celebration for Jim last week. Biden thanked Jim for his friendship and praised his work, saying, quote, "You work not to inflame or entertain your audience, but to report honestly, illuminate the facts, and keep us informed." With a career as distinctive as Jim's, it's only fitting that his name lives in the halls of Action News. So last week, we dedicated our news studio to the one and only. From now on, we deliver the news to you from the Jim Gardner studio.
Jim's work on the anchor desk and in the field have earned him numerous honors.
But his professional success has also paved the way for Jim to pay it forward. Tamla Edwards has more.
It is that consistency, work ethic, and reciprocal trust that Jim has built with the community over 4 decades that has garnered accolades. Jim holds 3 honorary degrees: Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine in 2010, St. Joseph's University in 2016, and Lafayette College in 2018.
Who is Jim Gardner? He is an icon. That's a word we hear a whole lot, but he is truly an icon.
Earlier this month, Jim was recognized on the floor of the U.S. Senate by Delaware Senators Tom Carper and Chris Coons.
You are a genuine treasure, a jewel of the Delaware Valley, and we will miss you deeply.
Representative Madeline Dean did the same on the floor of the House.
And Jim works with character, generosity, and a deep love of all of his neighbors.
Philadelphia City Council adopted a resolution renaming the street outside the WPVI studios in Jim's honor.
I am bowled over.
Meanwhile, his contributions to the television industry have been recognized by his peers. He's been inducted into the Hall of Fame for both the Pennsylvania Association of Broadcasters and the Broadcast Pioneers of Philadelphia.
And the rest of the Temple Update crew.
But it is his efforts to lend a hand to future broadcasters that makes Jim the most proud. Since 1987, Jim has quietly provided an annual scholarship for a student at Temple University's Klein College of Media and Communication.
At Temple, 9 out of every 10 of our students have significant financial need when they come here. So these scholarships allow them to complete their college education, and Jim's in particular has been really helpful to these students.
Jim has also contributed to the Donald Belisario College of Communications at Penn State, where his son Josh attended. And his philanthropy extends to the field of medicine and search for cures. Jim's major donation and a matching gift from Disney helped spur collections for the PHL COVID-19 Fund in the early days of the pandemic. Jim supported the Gary Papa Run. And who could forget the Ice Bucket Challenge for ALS?
That's just a little bit chilly.
Future journalists have looked up to Jim as an example.
And for a lucky few, Jim turned up in their classrooms.
Stand by in 3,
2, 1, roll.
The world of TV has always been so amazing to me.
I'm Melissa Clausel.
Take 1.
And I'm Maggie Fitzgerald. And watching 6 ABC growing up, having Jim Gardner as like an inspiration in that aspect has been amazing, and it's been throughout my life. He's the man of the hour at 6 p.m. When we're around the dinner table.
Take 2.
We're officially sworn in Monday, and I was interested in being on camera and getting that reporting experience that would prepare me for the real world. Now I'm an anchor here as a junior with Temple Update.
Take 1.
It's that time of year again. He came a few weeks ago to just witness our entire production. So we had the pleasure of actually anchoring for the day in front of him, which was a lot of pressure.
The anchors.
He really emphasized the concept of collaboration.
Maggie and Alyssa, I'll send it back to you.
We all work as a team, and we take that inspiration from news teams like 6 ABC.
Take 2.
We'll have that and more next.
Don't go anywhere.
I think a lot of the things that we actually do at Temple Update
come from working with Jim and working with Channel 6. The Vosotvo revision is due Friday at midnight. I started producing with Jim on the 11, and I worked at Channel 6 for 25 years.
Hannah, you can be camera 3.
So we try to replicate what's happening in newsrooms across the city every week.
And the VO is going to come out of server X.
So they're already on their way, and we've had now generations of Temple Update people who are rising through the ranks.
Becca Hendrickson is live at the scene of the accident.
When I was a student in Temple Update, I used to watch Jim read a script, and then I would repeat it back in order to practice, to learn how to properly, I guess, deliver the news.
Raising more than $50,000 so far for her daughter's recovery.
And I'm not the only person who grew up in this area watching Jim.
Action News reporter Eliana Gomez is live at Ben Salem Police tonight.
I grew up in Collingswood, New Jersey, and I'm a big fan of Jim Gardner. I think many people are. And I think it's not just because of his presence on TV, but also the person he is, who he is.
Action News reporter Maggie Kent is live in the northern...
Literally forever, Jim has been on the air for longer than I have been alive. Channel 6 Action News, Jim. From the morning, after school, through dinner, we were subscribing to all of it growing up.
Monday, clouds and sun, 90 degrees. So I first actually grew up in Downingtown and then Royersford. I was raised in a house that always had the news on. I was one of those kids that pretended to have an anchor voice, just like the people that I grew up watching. After a hot and humid couple of days, people like Jim, I wanted to be them, and now I get to work with them, which makes it even more special.
Brittany, I don't mean to embarrass you, but you are one terrific addition to the Action News family. Welcome.
That means a lot coming from you. Thank you.
I grew up in Glenside, Montgomery County, and Jim is the person that we all grew up watching.
Jillian, you've been surveying prices at the pump. Where do we stand?
We've all been lucky enough to have worked with him, some for a year, some for 20 years, some for longer. We just have to emulate how he is as a person, as a broadcaster, as a journalist.
Every president since the late 1970s, 7 Philadelphia mayors, and numerous local, state, and federal politicians in between.
Ahead, Jim's extensive coverage of the topic he's truly passionate about, politics.
I remember my very first live shot for Channel 6. I got back to the station and found a handwritten note on my typewriter. You know what that is. Anyway, it was from Jim, and it said, "Good live shot. Not so sure about the mustache, though." Of course, because nobody rocks a mustache like Jim. Well, anyway, the two mustaches found a way to coexist for almost 30 years. And it was an honor and a privilege working with you, Jim. So congratulations on your retirement. Enjoy yourself. And don't go shaving. We love you just the way you are.
Love politics, and even from the very beginning, that was what I enjoyed most as a reporter.
Jim's passion for politics has served him and our viewers well for more than 4 decades. He's interviewed every president since the late 1970s, and candidates too. But one, he says, stands out.
Sitting in the White House with Barack Obama on 2 occasions was an extraordinary experience because he was the first black president of the United States of America, and a lot of people didn't think that might ever happen, much less happen in 2008. And I was overwhelmed by the historical significance of that situation.
And there's the current president, Joe Biden.
Jim Gardner from Channel 6.
Hey, Jim, how are you?
How are you, sir?
Good to see you, man.
It's good to see you.
Who's been part of Delaware's political landscape for longer than Jim has been at Action News. Jim spent the day with then Senator Biden on Capitol Hill the day before George W. Bush was sworn into office in 2001.
The moment that George W. Bush raises that right hand and says, "So help me God," power has been transferred.
Absolutely.
And what is Joe Biden thinking at that moment?
This is the president. I have to work with him. Where we can cooperate, we'll cooperate. Where we have disagreements, try to diminish them.
Fast forward to Washington 2016. Then they discussed Biden's term as vice president.
You were the point person on getting gun control legislation through the Congress in the wake of Sandy Hook.
I was.
And that effort failed.
Yes.
Would you have done, now looking back, anything differently?
Yes. I would have spent less time emphasizing assault weapons, which sort of took the eye off the ball here.
4 years later, in 2020, Jim talked with then candidate for President Biden about the COVID-19 response in the early days of the pandemic.
It sounds like you're saying that this could be a catalyst for a better world.
It can. It absolutely can, Jim, and that's what the great thing about America. We're the only nation in the world that's been able to turn great crises into opportunities.
Jim has also covered every major political convention in cities across America.
I'm Jim Gardner in San Diego.
I'm Jim Gardner from Tampa.
Including 2 right here in Philadelphia, the Republican National Convention in 2000 and the Democrats in 2016.
We're now down on the floor with the Pennsylvania delegation to see how they felt about their governor's effort.
There were many political firsts.
This will be the first time in history that a Jewish American stands up to accept a major party nomination for vice president. Anytime there is a first in politics, it is at least notable. The atmosphere was electric at the Democratic Convention in 1984 when Geraldine Ferraro accepted the nomination for vice president, even though that ticket went up in flames.
And moments of political unity. Jim visited with George H.W. Bush at his home in Kennebunkport, Maine, ahead of the 2006 Liberty Medal. It was an honor Mr. Bush received along with Bill Clinton for their efforts together after Hurricane Katrina.
Both of us took on a little water, but not much, because I think people saw that we were trying to do the right thing.
When students, school students, read about John McCain 20 years from now, what do you hope they'll learn from reading about you?
That he served his country.
Jim moderated so many major debates over the years.
The opponents in this race are very familiar to the vast majority of our viewers. Tonight's debate with the Democratic candidates for mayor of Philadelphia. Welcome to the final debate to be broadcast between the candidates for governor of Pennsylvania.
From U.S. Senate and gubernatorial races to mayoral and district attorney contests. And his tenure here at Action News saw Philadelphia through 7 mayors. Frank Rizzo, William Green III, Wilson Good, Ed Rendell, John Street, Michael Nutter, and Jim Kenney.
That was anchor Brian Taff reporting.
Brian, with his own passion for politics, will succeed Jim on the 6 p.m. newscast.
We'll be right back with a final thought from Jim about his time at Action News.
Jim's 46 years at Action News have been nothing short of legendary and iconic. Tonight, you saw just a fraction of the contributions Jim has made to 6 ABC and the Delaware Valley.
Jim set a standard, one that we will now carry forward. We leave you with a few final words on this historic broadcast career from the man himself.
I've had an extraordinary opportunity. It's unusual. It's very unusual to be the anchor of a 6-11 o'clock newscast at the same television station for generations. I loved living in Philadelphia. I loved the city. I loved Channel 6. And I, was creating a family. Despite these funky hours that I had over the years, I made it my business to be home almost every night for dinner. I'm proud of the fact that someone who is 60 years old and they may have grandchildren have been watching us and me for as long as they can remember. We've been here. It's been every day for a long time. I'm glad we could do it.